In this video, I'm going to talk about dysfunctional families and cheap ones. These are the parents who are cheap, and some would say frugal, but this is so cheap that they raise their children. They don't take them to the doctor or to the dentist along this line unless it's like a dire emergency, okay, impending death or something. If they didn't, that they might get caught, but other than that, no. Okay. And I think many of us grew up in this kind of family. People who grew up in dysfunctional family, maybe many of them did, where they were so cheap that was the case, or they just didn't. There were various reasons why they wouldn't do it, but they didn't, I should say. I have to say that times have definitely changed since back then. Back then, I don't remember, at least where I was, okay, I don't remember many people having health insurance, especially kids. So they were paying out of pocket. These days it's a totally different story. I don't know what's going on here, so no idea. And yeah, I was being a, what they call it, rubbernecker. But anyway, isn't that what it is? Yeah. But anyway, where I grew up, like I said, that people just didn't, and even the wealthy families, they didn't have the health insurance that they paid out of pocket. Now, these days, a lot of people don't call them dysfunctional families, they call them narcissistic families. And like one parent is this way, and they want to keep all the money for themselves, so they're not going to spend any extra money on their children other than what they have to, and like in case that they want to look good or not at least get fined or whatever because they're not doing right by their children. Okay, but basically they would do just enough, okay, for their children. Now, I had this on my mind because last night, it was Friday the 13th, and around 11 o'clock, which, that's important, 11 o'clock, I noticed that I had swollen what it turned out is a lymph node was swollen. And it made me think about, now that's too late to go to my doctor's office, and I've had my lymph node swollen before, but on the other side, and I was with a nurse at that time, and she said just wait and see what happens, and the next day it was gone. And so I've had this happen before. And like I said, I'm not going to go to emergency room for that because I've had it before. Which some would say you should, but some would say that because of the way I was raised, I don't. I don't jump. I used to, but anyway. Now, I had this on my mind, and it reminded me of when I was a kid and I had the mumps. Okay. So I got the mumps, and in my neighborhood back then, we had a lot of kids in the neighborhood. I think one family had 9 kids or something like that. There were a lot of kids. And so I got the mumps. I have 4 siblings myself, 3 sisters and a brother. And they were, in a way, happy, my parents, that I got the mumps. I'm not kidding. And then the neighbors across the street, the mother of the neighbors, she sent her 2 children over, which were our age, around our ages. And so they could talk to me through, it was the window, had a screen on it, but talk to me so they could get the mumps. And that's how people back then, as a kid, that's the only ones I knew, thought about it. Their thought pattern was just let all the kids in the neighborhood get the mumps and get it over with. Seriously, I remember hearing that. Now, I don't really know much about the mumps. I just remember when I was a kid. And the way they found out, figured out what I had, they didn't take me to a doctor. It was to give me a pickle to eat. I don't remember exactly how I felt, but I do remember I was like, like I felt like I was a kid. I felt like I was dying when they had me eat a pickle. I wouldn't suggest that to anybody. Just take even a bite was so bad. I just remember it was bad. And but see, they didn't do things like take the kid to the doctor. It just didn't happen. But as far as I know, they then had all the other kids kind of spread it around the neighborhood. All the parents wanted their kids to have the mumps and get them over with. Yeah. So, but back then I think it was common that people kind of took it into their own hands. They didn't like I said, they didn't have health insurance. You have to kind of put yourself back in those times, where they were paying out of pocket and they had a lot of kids. Yeah. So they just, had the kids just, they didn't take them to the doctor. They just knew what it was and, let them have it, really, seriously. Okay, when I was a kid also, I remember I would get sick a lot. And my parents would never take me to the doctor. And I would have they would just say, oh, you have a cold or you had the flu. No, it was allergies. And if they had ever taken me to the doctor during one of those times, which they didn't, seriously, they just didn't back then. Or, like I said, it could have just been them. But they would have found out that I had allergies, and they would have found it. The doctor would have prescribed me something. I don't know how it was back then, if it was a prescription or not, because, not all allergy medications were over the counter so much as they are today. No, they weren't. They were by prescription. And it wasn't until I was in my, I think, 20s and I was married that I found out that there was actually a medication for what was going wrong with me. Didn't know what it was, but a doctor gave me a sample. And I was like, I wish I could find samples like that. Still didn't know. And at that time I was moving from where I was, so I didn't go back to that doctor. And I don't know. You grow up, it becomes a part of you, seriously. And that's the thing that I want to mention, if you grew up, and they didn't do things like take kids to the doctor or take you even to the dentist. I remember the school had some kind of program they were doing on kids and about sending them to the doctor. My mom agreed to it, the dentist, and they put fillings in my teeth. I had those in there for years. We just weren't taught how to do things like go to yearly checkups with doctors, and dentists. Go to your dentist and see, how often you need to go back and all this. We weren't taught that, so it didn't become part of me until I got older, But it took longer for me to get into that because I didn't have that as a child. And the reason, my thought was money. They just didn't. Well, there were various reasons. My mother had what people pronounce these days as agoraphobia, and she didn't want to leave the house. So my dad worked full time. He wasn't home during the day to take. We had they had 5 kids living in the house, and I'm not trying to really make excuses because you do things for your kids, but they just didn't. And I would say maybe they were trying to say that it was about money, but no. Right next door lived my maternal grandparents, and they were wealthy. So there was nothing about money. But they just didn't drive, by the way. So I think I'll wrap this up now. It's getting kind of noisy out here, and I need to go in the store. But what about you? How did you grow up? How long did it take you to learn some simple things like that? To go to the hospital, and even if you've learned it, does it still not really stick? Still doesn't stick with me, but I don't have health insurance. I live in Texas, and I'm a homemaker, so yeah, I don't have health insurance. Texas opted out of the ACA, so yeah. Anyway, okay, I'm going to wrap this up.